Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So it is our pleasure to have as our guest today, artist Shan Wallace. Inspired by the harsh racial, social, and economic realities of her surroundings in Baltimore, Shan learned about the importance of service, the power of collaboration, and the effects of social change at an early age. Shan uses her lens, collage, and EC2 installations as the basis of her work, demonstrating the cultural, political narratives of Black life, confronting oppressive politics and histories within communities of the African diaspora, and challenging ideas surrounding existing collections, culture, and archives of Blackness. Much of Shan's work is focused on the archive, its history of development, challenges of the modern archive as artwork, and how to ethically accumulate primary source documents. Please join me in a warm welcome, giving Shan a warm welcome to CCM.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for having me. Thank you all for attending. So I'm just going to share my screen and kind of jump into my presentation. I'm going to go quickly so we can kind of have a discussion like after. Please let me know if I'm going too quick. Okay. Okay, let's see. So I'm Shan. I'm from Baltimore, born in '91. I'm a photographer and visual artist, and I'm just going to share just some of my work, some of my methods, some of my value as an artist, making work in the streets, doing assignment work, commission work, and also being an artist. So I was already introduced, but a lot of my work is challenging, literally challenging the ideas and the practices of archives. I think very often there are communities, especially underserved communities, who don't have access to archives, who don't have access to materials that could potentially help them or educate them or communicate to them. And so, as an artist, I try to spend my practice rethinking how to make my work accessible, and also how to be more collaborative in my practice. And so I'm going to talk a lot about that. I've been able to receive some widespread report from the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, Charlotte Observer, the New York Times, and the Daily Beast, and a couple more other publications. I also do a lot of commercial work. So often I contribute to publications like the New York Times, like The Cut as well. So some inspirations of mine, and I like to line up the photograph so you can kind of see how very often imagery that is like older and imagery that's more contemporary, often shares the same sort of visual language, shares sort of the same like type of communication and type of um, I would say editing or framing or just like the same type of skill. So this is my photograph on the left. And then on the right is Curry May Weems, who's a photographer, who's an artist I tremendously admire and look up to. Daoud Bey is certainly one of my favorites as well. He does a lot of documentary work. He has a beautiful project that I think it might be called the Birmingham Project. I'm not sure, but it took place in Birmingham, and it's really about the history and the realities of Birmingham, especially after the bombing of the church with the four girls in it. And then here's my image of just my student. Very often, I see how photographers and image makers are kind of thinking the same things, but just, translating it and manifesting it differently. This is a photograph of mine on the left from Flint, Michigan. I went to help with the water crises, and I didn't even go as a photographer. I went to actually provide physical labor, and I took some photographs along the journey. And here on the right hand side is Latoya Ruby Frazier, a photograph she's taken from Flint, Michigan. I really, really, really love Latoya's work. A lot of her work is focused on like the working class, and particularly families and workers who are part of like industrial industries, factories, and just, like literally the working class. And her work has been very informative to me. And I think that it's a beautiful lens that she provides, and that she really pushes out to the world. And then this is just a photograph by Winfred Hall Allen, who was a photographer in the 30s. And this is just my image here. So I just wanted to share some inspiration of photographers that I study, photographers whose work I come across along my journey, and just often how inspiration, how it works. A photograph from the 30s could inspire me to make a photograph like this in 2019. And this was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. So some career highlights of mine in 2000 and can't really see that. Okay. In 2016, I was voted best photographer. And then the next year I received best solo show for my show called Ain't I a Woman, which was a photography installation. I Later that year, I got the front page of the Washington Post, which was really great. So the Washington Post found out about a project that I was working on. So, and this project was basically in response to the bus transformation that Baltimore was experiencing. So Governor Hogan came in office and completely executed a very different um, bus transformation that we already had. And so the transformation included, increased prices, decreased routes, decreased buses, redesign of buses, meaning smaller buses, um, and just a change of the bus stops and the bus routes. And that was a really hard hit for Baltimore. The city relies on public transportation. So, as a photographer and someone who documents my city, I decided to just document this transition that we were experiencing. And I'm going to show you photos from that. I received an Excellence in Healthcare Journalism Award for documenting a family in I think like Eastern Shore, Maryland. This family was raising a child who had childhood dementia, and so I was sent to spend some time with them and photograph them in a way that shows them surviving, but also really overcoming the lack of information and the lack of research that potentially could have helped their child. And this mother, she was just so strong and so motivated to really find real solutions. And the story is basically about that. And so I just accompanied the images. Another career highlight was Walls Divide, Defend, Divide, and Divine for the Annenberg Space of Photography. I was sent to Detroit to photograph the Detroit Wall, which is a physical wall that was built in the late 30s. And this wall was built in 8 Mile, which is the top of Detroit. It's not the 8 Mile that Eminem is from. I had to throw that out there. But this wall was about a mile long, about 6 feet, and it was built to separate Black and white families. So white families couldn't receive the government funding and the assistance to own homes, and the Black people couldn't even keep the little that they had unless this wall was consented to, because it was against the law for them to live in the same, literally live by each other. So I was sent there to interrogate and reinvestigate this wall and make some work around it. So the wall is completely different now. Some of it's been chopped down because there are streets going in between it. But as you know, Detroit is probably the blackest city in our country, and so this wall was completely reclaimed by the neighborhood, and it serves a much different purpose now. But that history is still there. And then my solo show at the Baltimore Museum of Art, which was basically my love letter to Baltimore. I'm going to talk more about that as well. So this is the front of the Washington Post. And the story was basically snapshots of inequality, what the bus system says about race, poverty, and history and class. And so I had already started doing this project on my own as a person who catches the bus, as someone who often lives in Baltimore. I saw that this was something that was affecting the city. And so it really started off as me focusing on the bus benches that used to say Baltimore City that reads, and now it says Baltimore, the greatest city in America. And from there, the project just became a little bit more layered and layered as I went. And this is just a snapshot from me being announced as best photographer. So I'm just going to share some photographs with you that were included in the Washington Post article. So, like I was saying, the bus benches. Bus benches are very important to Baltimore. One, because it has the name of the city on it, and it used to say Baltimore City that reads. And if you know about No Child Left Behind, and just like our education system, Baltimore hasn't always been a city that reads, and just like many other cities, students are struggling with test scores and struggling with literacy. And so now that it says Baltimore, the greatest city in America, that is also something that often people like to debate. But the bus benches, serve as community. It serves as communion. Some people meet and they talk about their day and they wait for the bus. Some people, like you see here, rest and sleep. And so this project started off as focusing on the bus benches. And then I had to start to focus on who are the people who catch the bus. And as you can see, this woman here has a FedEx shirt on. She obviously could be going from work or commuting to work. But I started to think more about just the bus system and not just the changes, but what has the bus system said about Baltimore and what does it say about its riders? And so here is when Mary, the reporter from the Washington Post, came to Baltimore, and we took a couple bus rides. And I wanted her to experience what it really means to catch the bus in the summertime when it's hot. And so here you can kind of see some visual language. So you see the two just like sitters here, and then in the back you can kind of see that the bus is crowded because people are standing up. So you see a person behind here, and then you see a guy here, you see a woman here, you see a person here, and then you see like just like small little like carved in letters and words here. And so we ended up on the bus, and this bus ride was very telling of just the experience because it was super hot, the AC wasn't working, and people were upset. And so again, it's just like the bus system is just very important and very a part of the daily commuting of Baltimoreans. And so one of the things that I used to do, I don't do it now because I'm not catching a bus as often, and also just COVID restrictions. I often, when it's cold, I don't really like to shoot outside. So I would often get on a bus and kind of like shoot outside of the window. And so this was just one of the images that I just happened to create looking outside of the window. And that looking and observing is really a part of my process. I look at myself as an observer, and the images and the work that I make is just my observations. And you can kind of tell that it is through a window because you can kind of see like the bus reflections right here. You kind of see like this like transparent like little piece here that's on this guy's body. Okay. So Baltimore Museum of Art 2020 vision. So I just had my solo show, and the Baltimore Museum of Art had decided that in 2020 that they would focus on female creativity. So the entire contemporary wing had nothing but female artists. Me, Valerie Maynard, who was the first artist at the Studio Museum in Harlem, Alyssa Moorhead, who, in collaboration with Bradford Young, who is a filmmaker. Bradford Young does a lot of the cinematography for Ava DuVernay. He actually did the cinematography for Selma, and Alyssa Moorhead actually did I believe she might have directed or did the cinematography for Jay-Z's 444 video. But the BMA decided to only also not just have the contemporary wing full of women artists, but also buy work from women makers. And so this is my photo installation here. And it's just all images of Baltimore. It's a love letter to Baltimore and about 5 years of work. Just the different layering kind of like insinuates my practice of collaging. I like to just add layers and, sometimes layer these similarities that we have and these differences that we have. And I think that 410, and it's named 410 because that is the first area code that we have. And depending on where you get your phone, you can still get a 410 number. But it was a real dedication and paying homage to the city that I love, a city that I was born in, a city that I care about, and a city that I often make work in. And much of my work, as you can see, is just rooted in community, and often all the time. Um, there's a collaboration between me and community because it's a real goal of mine to make sure that we are both authors of this Baltimore, this Black ongoing history, and that it's just not a one sided thing. And so this was just a space where Black Baltimoreans could come into the museum, in a space that was dedicated to them, carved out just for them, so they can see themselves, they can see reflections, they can see their neighbor, they can see people who live on the other side of town. And this is just one of the images. I actually, you're going to see in the next slide, but this is actually just I carved this out, and it was just a vinyl that was on the wall. And this is just one of the images that was on the wall. I mean, particularly in the summertime when it's warmer, I spend maybe like 10 hours a day walking, taking photographs, meeting people, talking to people. And very often there's it's not it's Baltimore is not an easy city to photograph. I can say that because people are not camera ready. It's not like New York where you have a lot of industries, you have a lot of famous photographers, you have a lot of traffic and a lot of stuff going on. You often see movies being shot there. I mean, it's nothing but screens in Baltimore. We have a different type of surveillance in Baltimore. We have planes flying over, we have cameras everywhere that are just constantly watching us. And so, as a photographer, I'm mindful of that. And so, I really work to make this a collaborative effort. And I work to be really honest. And I also work to give people copies of those images. And I'll talk about that more. And these are just two other images that were included into the show. The image on the left, I think it was probably the second image that I took that I liked, and I was like, oh, okay, I might be good at this photography stuff, but it certainly was an image that certainly empowered me and made me feel like that I'm finding my way, because I've been a photographer since dipping and dabbing since like 2010. I played professional basketball, so that was like my passion. And if I don't know if we have any athletes here, but if you're an athlete, you don't get to have time for other things. And so I've been pursuing art for maybe about 6 years. And this is the other side. So if you're looking at the other wall and you turn around, this is what you see. So this is the vinyl cutouts. And here is just some photographs of a 5 year project that I worked on called Golden Time of the Hour. And it's about Lexington Market. And so these cardstock images here, these are exactly the photographs and the material that I give people when I give people copies of those images. And so I spent a lot of time. I don't believe that I don't believe that any of us should go into communities or places that we're not from and that we're not accepted in and just start doing things and making decisions and making work and taking pictures. I like to, earn my way into a lot of these places. So in Lexington Market, even though I'm from here, there is a certain type of sensitivity in every community, in everyone's neighborhood. And so a way for me to build that trust, a way for me to share ownership over the work, a way for me to share, authorship is to give people copies of those images. So for the most part, everyone who I photographed has a copy of the image, which is this here. So it's just cardstock 11 by 17, and I just give people images. And as you can see, you can just see that they're like portraits here. And so, I this person especially stands out because I remember taking a photograph. I remember giving a photograph to someone. This person, this woman, she saw it and was like, "Oh, can I get one?" And I was like, "Yeah, I got to take a photo of you." And then she kind of was like, "Okay, no." And then came back and was like, "Okay, I'm ready." And so, my process isn't just about my ideas and my creative impulses and solutions. It's really about meeting people where they are and listening and observing. This woman here, didn't say much to me. I feel like when I came around with my camera, she kind of looked at me and, I don't think that she was impressed. which was okay. I like to earn it. I like to work hard. And I remember her family came to visit and she stopped me and said, "Hey, take a photo. This is 4 generations of Blackness." And it was her sister, her daughter, her, and her grandson. And I was more than delighted to give her a photograph. And then she knew that I was going to give her a copy. And now in this photograph, after, she's smiling at me because, we were able to collaborate. And this is just another image. So the project is basically about this small community of people who come to Lexington Market who would dance to live music from 12 to 2. My goal is to always tell stories, especially artistically, is to always capture and tell stories that reporters can't really tell. And since I have access to the community, since I'm a part of it, why not, archive this history? And so all of the work that I am making is meant to be archived, and inserted into museum spaces, inserted to collections, and inserted to archives. And when I mean archives, I'm not just saying like what's at the library, what's at the museum, but I'm also saying what's in this woman's home, or what's in grandma's home, or what's in what's at this church. I believe in, creating, working with people and collaborating with people to make archives more accessible. And so this is just one of my favorite photographs from this 5-year archive of Lexington Market, which is sadly being gentrified now. And so the market in which I know and many of us know in Baltimore will certainly change and become like, how what happens during gentrification. And then this here, often with the work that I make, I create some sort of program, and I am always thinking about how I can make the work more and more and more accessible. And so these are just written notes that accompanied 410 that was a part of the show that just talk about my process. I felt like, writing and showing my signature and just showing my handwriting, I think it was a way to just continue to invite people into the process and understanding the process as well as the work. And so this is a zine that I did it. And yeah, this is a zine that I did, that was just really simple. What does it mean to be Black? And I took photographs of people and I asked them what it meant to be Black. And I didn't sell many of them, but I distributed them throughout the city because I know that, many people are not going to museums, they're not going to bookstores, they don't possibly even know that they have access to artists in their community. And so I would just take, maybe if I would sell 20, I would give away 10. And so often I would just give away and just show people the work that I was making just for it to be accessible. And so here's his grandmother. I like got off the bus and walked, and I saw this grandmother and her grandkids, and I just went over and shared it, and we started taking pictures, and it just became a good time. And very often strangers end up as family. Same here. So the kid that's on the front, this is actually him right here. And I especially like this image because this is his sister. His sister's super proud. He's super proud. And I went, a quick story. I went to this neighborhood, and this neighborhood, they I photographed them often, but I had went and I had taken this book, I had taken the zine, and I remember the mother being super proud and super encouraging to me. And I remember it was like the first day of school. I remember all of the kids were outside reading the zine and just, we were taking a bunch of photographs, but really cheering this kid on, but also really just feeling included and feeling like they have access to positivity and feeling like they have access to art. And you can kind of see that the kids still have their uniforms on. And then I had some postcards made where I would just, pass them out, and, as a way to, share my website and share the hashtag, but also often teachers would invite me into schools, and I would just bring postcards just to see what it really meant to be Black to young students, because very often I'm out in the streets, but I also, as an educator, I am also very curious, and I'm also questioning what young people, what the youth are thinking and saying. And these are just images of more people engaging. This guy actually this bus behind him. He got off the bus just to come to me and ask me for a copy, and I just gave him a copy. I think he saw me giving some out and jump right off the bus. And this was just a school that I went to. And so, very often I am always thinking about how I can make work accessible, how I can be creative. And so, Baltimore, we have over 15,000 vacant homes and buildings and lots. So, I decided to get some I decided to get some photographs printed, and I just pasted them throughout the city. I mean, we have over 15,000, we have so over 10,000 vacant homes. There's nothing but space. I mean, sure, someone owns it. I don't think the cops or anybody's going to run up on me for pasting images. But it was also a thing like I know that many people don't have access to internet, don't have smartphones, don't have Instagram, don't really have access to my work. And so for me, this was a way of meeting community where they are and saying, all you really have to do is walk outside your house or walk in a particular neighborhood and you'll see the images here. And then this is just a photograph from a residency I went to. I love going to residencies. If we have any artists in the audience here, please go to residencies. They are like to me one of the top ways that you can invest in an artist. You get them time, you get them money, you get them a place to stay, and you give a place to work. And very often, as an artist, that is not we don't have access to that. Very often people are working in service and then making art on their time off or doing commercial work like myself. I'm a full-time artist and my commercial work and my art supports me. Um, but it's nothing like going to a residency where you have access to all of the things that you need, or and if you don't, you can find that access. So these are just photographs in just different neighborhoods. And this was something that was really impulsive. I just got up one day and I got some work printed and I was able to get it the same day. And I just went out in the city and just glued everything on and stapled it and, wrote on some of them. And these are two images from the Beatties Ford Library. So I went to a residency in Charlotte, North Carolina called the Roll Up, and I was there for 6 months, and I had over 100 programs to do. And one of the programs was me going to this library in Beatties Ford, which is very important to this community. Is where people apply for jobs, is where young people go, is where people go to vote. But this library is super, super important to this community. So I will post up every Monday and take portraits of families, single people. So people would drive through traffic, they would get off work, and I would be at the library posted up with backdrops and lights just so I can take, professional photographs of people and also give them copies as well. And this is a photograph of the woman that I previously showed you. This is a photograph of her seeing her photograph and her friend kind of being really happy for her. And you'd be surprised how important and how critical it could be to someone's life if you collaborate with them, if you share with them, if you also meet them where they are. And that's, to me, that's what accessibility is. That's what archiving should be about to me. It's really about sharing and making it accessible. So there isn't this hierarchy when it comes to reaching archives. You don't have to go to a museum and be on a waiting list, or you don't have to go and you don't have to not have access. For me, it's all about access. It's all about sharing. It's all about this shared ownership. And so I'm always thinking of how I can demonstrate and promote the value of archiving, because it's just super important to me. And since we all have like phones and, everything is technological, there are a lot of people who don't have access to the things that we have access to. So as an art maker, I am always thinking about that. And then here's another image of some guys. This guy in the jean shirt ended up being in 410. But this is what it looks like. I usually have this folder that someone gave to me that they got from Target, and a stack of images. And these images are for me to share with people. And also, if I happen to run into people, then I already have their image with me. And very often, some people don't have phones, so I usually say, okay, I took your photograph here. Meet me on this corner next Tuesday so I can give you this photograph. And often some people meet me, and then some people, I'm sure, they forget because of life. but I'm always carrying it because Baltimore is a small city. I'm always walking the city, and I never know who I may run into. And very often I run into people who I photograph. And so currently, right now, I have an installation up, and this is the installation. So this is a part of the BMA. They're going through some construction, as you can kind of see in the back a little. And so they basically built me a fence to display some work. And so I also do collage work. I like to point out that the posters here, these like little posters here, are also just details from my photographs. And so as you're driving down by the BMA, you see all these different just posters and banners that are my work. But I like to collage, and collaging has been a really important practice for me. I'm always thinking about how I can deepen my artistry. I'm always thinking about how I can, tell the same stories, bigger stories or smaller stories in different ways in different mediums. So I do collage. And so all of the photographs that you've seen, all of the archive material that you've seen, I use to photograph. So I photograph with my own collages, and I'm going to show you how it looks. So this is just a close up on the fence. And it's mesh material, and I think it might be like 5 by maybe like 60 or 70. And so the entire fence is split with collages that I made. So the collection is called The Avenue. The Avenue, this collection is in collaboration with the Spring House. So the Spring House is the BMA's largest artifact. It was a house in Roland Park, which is in like northern Baltimore, but it was a house. It wasn't even a house. It was a big refrigerator where enslaved Black people would work to keep food cold. And so it's right behind the fence. And so they had asked me, would you want to do this installation? Now, of course, I said yes, but I was thinking about what would it be about, and I thought about, well, the spring house is right behind, right here, so why not the spring house? But what is the spring house? It's a big refrigerator where Black enslaved people kept food cold. Okay, how does that tie into my work? Oh, it ties into my work because I photograph Black people, and I do a lot of research. So my the avenue is basically about this imagined culinary journey that is supported by research. Using my own photographs, I made these collages that really talk about the culinary journey of Black people. And so here, this is Supper's Our Time. This is one of the collages here. And so I use my own photographs only, and I do them digitally as well as physically. And so very often there are like hundreds of layers. So I think this one might have had maybe like 80 layers, but I'm always stitching together and creating these figures. So I'll tell you in detail about it. So these feet come from someone. This is a different leg. So I'm literally grabbing from my subjectivity and my sitters to create these figures. So this figure here, I want to say most of this figure here came from like 7 other people. And so yes, I'm always thinking about how I can make figures, how I can share a familiar world, but also a world that may be foreign to others, and how I can tie into my creativity, my archive, and history. And this here is called Hemmings Tavern. So this is actually named after James Hemmings, who was the cook of one of our presidents, George Washington, I believe. Um, and Hemmings actually was one of his cooks and would cook for him often, but he was never able to buy his freedom, so he ran away. He's also the sister of I'm blanking on the name, but we definitely know his sister. I can't think of it, but I'm sure someone will probably remind me. And so James Hemmings ran away. He didn't, because he wasn't able to buy his freedom. He ran away and came to Baltimore. And he came to Baltimore, and then he ended up ending his life. And so this was a way for me to reimagine if his life was continued, if he did buy his freedom, or if he didn't buy his freedom. So this is his tavern. And this here is Pigfoot Murray. So Pigfoot Murray is this woman who migrated from the south to the north, and worked as a service worker. And then she ended up using her money to buy basically a baby carriage. And she would sell food like pig feet, fried chicken outside of her carriage. And she made a lot of money. But not only did she make a lot of money, she also kind of nurtured and really provided solace for Black people who migrated, who were missing the South. And so a lot of her meals and recipes were just like those meals and recipes that folks were eating and engaging with in the South. And I thought that was really interesting because this woman literally migrated and really provided a home like feeling for people who were living in New York and made a lot of money, but not and made a lot of money, supported some people, gave people a homely feeling, but also, bought property that eventually housed people. And so the Avenue is really just about this culinary journey and how many African Americans were able to buy their freedom, and they were able to buy their freedom and freedom of others, and provide a better life for themselves, just at the service of food. And so this is my last slide here. I wanted to share this quote that I read from this book, Photo Work. Once you find your voice and your vision, you should think about your audience and how to best engage them. And I think for some, not even I think, I know for some time, it took me a while to find my voice. And it took me some failures, it took me some successes, but it just really took a lot of effort for me to find my voice and figure out what I wanted to be, what I wanted to say, and how I wanted to evolve that voice as well. So, if we have any writers or any art makers or any creatives, in the audience, I want to encourage you, you know, um, to find your voice. And it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take a lot of energy, but it's there, and we all have something to say, we all have valuable perspective, and our lives really do matter, and our stories matter, and our creativity matter, and our art matters. And so I just wanted to end off with this. This is also I also, it talks about vision. I'm always thinking about, as an art maker, I'm always thinking about sharing my vision with students. So I spent a lot of time teaching. I was teaching for the Getty Museum in LA, Artworks LA, a lot of nonprofits and after school programs. I don't teach in the public system, but I do a lot of teaching, period. And I'm always thinking about how I can show up and be the Shan that I wish that I had, because I didn't grow up in an art home. I didn't grow up engaging in art at all. It took me an entire basketball career in college and high school, to really figure out what I wanted to do with myself and my life. And that is all I got.
Great. Thank you so much, Chan. That was really wonderful seeing your journey through the way that you engage in the community, the way that there are so many interesting facets to how to be a witness, how to be an observer, how to
Mhm.
be a community member, and how to negotiate all those spaces. So first I want to start, I'll read a question that Josiah posed, and then a couple of other people would like to unmute themselves and ask a question. So
Perfect.
Josiah's question regards the reason why there was no air conditioning on the bus. And he also would like to know what happened to the 15,000 vacant homes and buildings that you referred to in your presentation.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know exactly why there was no air conditioning on the bus, but I will say that a lot of our buses are old. And I think that it was just a mechanical thing, but it's very telling because even though we don't have a basic necessity like air conditioning on a 90-degree day, people still have to get to where they have to go, and that nothing stops. I can't call out of work. I can't not commute to work. I can't not get on the bus because there's no air conditioning. And so I think that this really shows how important basic necessities are and how important accommodations are. And so the 15,000 buildings, I mean, you know, oh, just like, Detroit, especially during the bankruptcy time, people have lost their homes. And that is because of a lot of things. We have a lot of industries here. So we have John Hopkins here. John Hopkins buys up everything. John Hopkins basically owns the entire East Baltimore. And often they will buy up acres of neighborhoods and just let those vacant homes sit for 5, 10 years, and then maybe turn them into a Starbucks or turn them into a parking garage. We have Under Armour here. Under Armour just bought 45 blocks and behind the harbor, Cherry Hill, Westport, and Brooklyn. And all of these are, poor working class neighborhoods. And so with these 45 blocks, they're going to build themselves a new city. And I don't know if you know anything about Under Armour, but Under Armour does not have a lot of Black employees, and they damn sure don't have a lot of employees from Baltimore. And so most of their employees are transplants. And they bought 45 blocks, and in these blocks are obviously working class people. It's a Walmart where people work. The Walmart has been closed, and those small nonprofits and startup companies are slowly moving in, and those people are quickly being pushed out. And so very often it happens because businesses close, industries close, people lose their homes because Baltimore is an impoverished city. Maryland has a lot of money, but Baltimore is not invested in as it could be and as it should be for many reasons. And so when that happens, when there is de-investment, there's decay. And there is 15,000 vacant homes. There is vacant lots and buildings. And it's solely up to politicians and our leaders to invest into our city, to not only beautify it, but really invest into people so they have jobs and they have money and they have, security, so we don't have decay all around the city.
Great, thank you. And just a comment, if for anyone that has ever spent any time working or needing to access New York City, I know that I've been on a subway car multiple times throughout my my working career that had absolutely no air conditioning either.
Mhm.
So yeah, a lot of that is just a failure of infrastructure, unfortunately, like you said, old equipment,
Yep.
and all those other reasons. And I think you bring up a really fascinating point regarding John Hopkins and how, oftentimes these very prestigious institutions, how they are in this sort of like asset accumulation,
Mhm.
sort of like mindset framework, and what it is, even though they are an anchor institution that is there to help the community, they then do all these other things to also sort of benefit their own personal
Even when you think
investments.
about Henrietta Lacks, if you don't know about Henrietta Lacks, I would certainly recommend that you learn. But they were able to find, stem cell research and different progressive methods of medicine because they took advantage of this Black woman's body. And so it's just, a lot of these institutions, and I'll talk about John Hopkins. There is just things that these institutions just will not do, and so they will buy acres of neighborhoods and let those neighborhoods sit. And then what happens also, they refurbish these neighborhoods and then they give incentives to their staff to move into these neighborhoods. So these neighborhoods that are being refurbished and done up are not for Baltimoreans who live here. They're not for like, people who are on Section 8 vouchers who are, who are having challenges with housing. This is for their staff. And so this is what happens in a lot of cities. Detroit is going through the same thing because who basically owns Detroit? Uh, what's his name? He owns the Cavalier basketball team, and he owns Quicken Loans. Um, I can't think of his name, but he's making a lot of changes in Detroit, as well as the people who own Caesar's Pizza. So a lot of times these cities are really being controlled by the billions of dollars that maybe a family has, or maybe that an institution has.
Great, thank you. All right, so I think first up that would like to ask a question is John Soltis.
Hey, Nieves, if it's okay, I'm just gonna let
Yes,
Sky
Dan
go.
Gilbert. Sorry.
Ah,
Oh,
there we
all right, great. Oh, great, great.
I'll let Sky go for the students to get their questions in. I'll go at the end.
Okay, great.
I was just wondering if you have any projects that you're working on now or any future projects that you would like to work on or ideas for them.
Yes. So right now and you all should sign up. So it's nice that I'm gonna put it in the chat. It's nice that is actually doing a take the H out, but they're actually doing workshops with creatives in collaboration with Apple. So that's something that I'm working on. My workshop is in February. There's a workshop today. So if you go to It's Nice That's website, they'll give you a long list of the 24 workshops that they're doing till April. So that's something that I'm doing that I'm looking forward to. Um, I started this project called The Hyphen. I think that's the name for it now. And it's really about, I'm not sure what it's about, but I'm figuring it out. Very often for me, I have to, I don't, I don't really work in like projects. I kind of work in ideas and I kind of let them evolve and get better and better. But the Hyphen project is really just the relationship between a Black American and the flag. And I've been using the flag without really paying attention to it, but I've used the flag in my work plenty of times without really focusing on what that meant. So now I'm trying to investigate what it really means to be Black in America and conversation and relationship to the flag specifically. And what else? I want to get into some cinematography. I've been doing directing stuff. Like I directed a short film for Calvin Klein, and I directed the film for the Annenberg space photography film that we did about the walls. But I want to get into cinematography, and it seems like directing has kind of been calling me more to cinematography. And I know that it's a challenging role that I kind of want to get into. So now I'm in this point of just learning because it's I'm quarantined, I'm staying home, and I'm not really gaining the hands-on access that I want. And so I'm using a lot of this time to watch master classes, using a lot of time to read a bunch of books and really learn a lot because we're not going to get this time again. Because once we open up, we're gonna be flying out of our houses and really engaging and doing stuff. And so this is kind of like some time to really nurture the brain power, nurture the creativity, and also become a little bit more engaged with others are doing.
Great, and hopefully that time will come very soon. We'll be flying out of our houses safely.
Listen, I cannot wait.
All right, so Josiah, you had another question, and would you like to unmute yourself? Or did you want to type that in? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think I had another question to ask. Something like, what was happening in like the Black people, like in the magazine or newspaper? It was in one of the slides that I saw. There was like chicken and waffles, and what were the people doing in that slide?
Let me think of what slide you're talking about. Oh, they were dancing. I know what you're talking about. So Lexington Market is this huge market. And you will go there. They have vendors, so you will go and get food. And in the arcade part, which is the area that we saw, they were just dancing because often they would have these cover bands come in and just play all of the old hits that we like. And it was free. So you would come in and you would hear the music and you would dance with a stranger. But very often, I mean, all of the times that I went for 5 years, we would have so much fun. And for me, it was probably one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on because dancing. We like to dance, we like to engage. I like to see other people dance. And so they were the two people on both sides were dancing, and then the other people in the background were kind of like watching them and like laughing. And so it was really just a snapshot of a moment. None of really most of the work that I do, especially with the Lexington Market project, is like scripted or staged. And so it was just a really quick snapshot of some people who were dancing to this live music that we were all listening to. As you kind of see like the lady like dipping, and then like the two people like holding hands. It was just all just dancing. And I'm sure those people didn't know each other. Many of us didn't know who each other are, but started to become family once we started to spend more time together.
Great, thank you. So I believe, Hannah, you are next if you'd like to ask your question.
So I was wondering, when did you find that your work moved more into the industry and you were able to reach it outside of Detroit? And when did you make the transition from it becoming you just photographing the people? And it was always art, but known art. That makes sense.
So often what happens is, so Detroit happened because a curator I met, Jen Edwards, who's a curator at the Mint Museum in Charlotte. She was working with Katie, who was running the Annenberg. The Annenberg just closed because of COVID. But I met Jen in Charlotte, and she saw the work that I did when I was in Flint, and was like, hey, we would like to send you to Detroit because there is some work that could be done. I appreciated it because I'm Black. This is Detroit's a Black city. And I think that there are a lot of dynamics when we're working in communities that don't often reflect who we are. I'm not saying you should or should not do it, but there's just certain there's just certain elements and dynamics that, occur when you are like, when I went to photograph the family who was raising the kid with childhood dementia, that family was white. And for me, I had, they live in Eastern Shore. There are not a lot of Black people there. So that was a dynamic that we both shared that we, obviously had to overcome. And so, Jen saw the work that I did in Flint and then hit me up. And she's a curator. So very often it's a curator's job to know who to call when they have a certain assignment or a certain commission, or they want to have a certain work in a museum or in a show that they're building or curating. And so I think Jen did everything right because she saw some previous work and decided to take a chance on me because I had never heard of the Annenberg before. I had never heard of Detroit Wall. So from the time that she told me was a time that I did a lot of research, and then I finally went out to photograph the city. And then so also I used to use Instagram and like social media a lot as a way to kind of like push out my identity as an artist. Like, I do this, I do that, sharing my process. I don't necessarily do it as much now because it gets tricky with social media, because when you post a photo or whatever on Instagram, they essentially have the rights to it and they can license it out without your permission, because we consent to a lot of stuff when we use social media. And so I've been able to get some of my biggest clients through social media. And very often, like the New Yorker or different like publications do like Instagram takeovers. They just do all sorts of Instagram like type of like programming where you could share some of your work to people who have never seen it before. So often it's been word of mouth, often it's been social media. And so to answer your second question, I mean, I this is like my life's work, and a lot of it I just go and do on my own. And what I realized is that as an artist who had just started off, I had to bet on myself. And what that meant is a lot of my projects I had to pay for myself. A lot, like the wheat pacing project, I had to pay for myself, and the zine project I had to pay for myself. So a lot of your ideas you might have to fund or get funding for, just so others can be able to see it. And so that's really what happens. The more you put yourself out there, honestly, the more you are seen. I hope I answered the question.
I think you did. I didn't know if she was going to unmute herself to say yes or no, but I I think you did. Oh, Hannah, did you
Yeah, I
unmute
said
yourself?
thank
Okay.
you. I couldn't unmute myself. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So in the interest of time, and I wish we could keep this longer, but I know everybody has other things to do. And I want to thank you once again, Shan, for coming. The last two questions will come from John and from Jill. So
Okay.
John, if you'd like to ask.
Thank you so much for the talk today. It was remarkable. It was great. And I'm just curious on a couple things based on your work. When you go to a different city that's not Baltimore, what do you sort of is in your mind as far as audience goes? Does it change your work in some ways, the actual setting? It would seem that there's definitely a lot of forethought before you even start to click some pictures. So thank you.
Yes, most times I'm pretty anxious because I think that Baltimore has certainly impacted how I take photographs and impacted my process so much. And what works in Baltimore doesn't really work in other places like Detroit. Like Baltimore's walkable, Detroit's not walkable. And so before I'm going to a place, I'm always trying to connect with someone that's there. Someone. It could be someone that I may follow on social media. It could be a cousin of a friend of a friend. But I'm always thinking about how I can, just like plant one seed in that particular place. And then it really, I'm my process is pretty adaptable. Like I adapt to my surroundings, and since I'm from here, I'm from Baltimore. I can walk around and I kind of know the city like the back of my hand. But when I go to other places, like I'm actually working on a project in Wilmington, Delaware, and it's taken me time. One, because it's COVID. COVID has created a different world than what I'm used to, so the process is a little bit restrictive. Um, but I visited a couple of times, and I'm starting to figure out and take note of what works and what doesn't work. And so, very often, to answer your question, it requires me to get there first and observe, and then start to make work, and then and from the observation, it's I observe, meet people, talk to people, start to really fill out and figure out where I am, and then make the work next.
Great, thank you. So last question from Jill.
Hi, that was great. That was really interesting. I had a question a little bit about place also. Like when you cite the people that influence you, you're talking about cities like Flint, Michigan, Detroit, Birmingham, Alabama, Western Pennsylvania, and Baltimore, of course, are all industrial cities like auto and steel, right? And so I wonder how you think about, how processes deindustrialization sort of led to these communities of disinvestment that became primarily communities of color also. And like, how do you think about that? And how might you think about bringing that into your work visually?
I think the first ship that arrived in Virginia, I think that from just historically, Black people have used their physical bodies and their physical labor to make ends meet, or to make money for other people. And so I think that there's a real intersection of industries and just the historical aspect of Black people using their physical bodies for labor. Even, after, slavery, there were still industries like picking cotton and doing certain things that required so much labor, even though you were being paid poorly. And so I don't think that it's a coincidence that I'm kind of tapping into that. I actually didn't even think about it at all until you just said it. But I think, in more modern times, many people, surprisingly, many people don't go to college. I'm the one, I'm out of my entire family, I'm the only one who went to college on both sides of my family. And and so with that, you know, there that limits you to a certain type of industry, that limits you to a certain type of, you know, job. You know, most folks would prefer to do physical labor than to do that mental labor as a job, you know, to do that creative labor as a job. And so I think, you know, I that's a good question, because I'm thinking about it now, and I think really communities of color have just, you know, from our time of our ancestors arriving here, we've just always done physical labor. And a lot of times the physical labor jobs are the ones that we have the most access to. Like, you know, Baltimore, especially Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Detroit, a lot of these places had nothing but industries that required you to do physical labor. And granted, a lot of those industries have closed, but now you have newer ones like John Hopkins, who requires you to do physical labor. Schools, you know, require you to do physical labor. And also, our access to certain positions require physical labor. Like, you know, you think about like the White House, what we saw in the Capitol. The people who cleaned the Capitol up were Black people, and that was physical labor. And so I think that I think that the underlying is that physical labor has always been a part of our journey as workers and as working class. And even as a photographer, I'm creatively thinking of things, I'm mentally thinking of things, but the photography part takes a lot on my body, because I'm walking a lot. I'm walking literally 8 hours a day. I am, you know, since I am thinking about community, I'm also providing my body at, I'm, you know, providing my body as a means of service to people, helping people. Um, Often I go and might photograph like a turkey giveaway during Thanksgiving, and often that requires me to put my camera to the side for a second and provide and, you know, help pass out turkeys. And cold frozen turkeys are a little heavy, and so yeah, I think that the physical labor part, especially within the different industries of this places I'm inspired by, really just goes with my process as a photographer. It's just a lot of physical labor. On top of, I photograph a city that, you know, has our homicides increase every year. And so it's not the safest thing for me to also do. And I'm always thinking about, and that's what I think about the most, because that's a hard seed to kind of swallow, something hard to accept, because I enjoy photographing the city, but there's a lot of activity that's happening that's kind of snatching lives. And I think when I think about that, a lot of that is me putting my own physical body on the line and kind of like using my own physical body, not only to get the images, but to also protect myself during this process. I hope I answered your question. That was a really good question.
Great answer, really interesting.
Thank y'all so much for having me. It's been really great.
No, thank you. I think we are pretty much out of time, correct?
Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. It was wonderful getting a chance to hear you speak and learning more about your work. I've enjoyed your work when I've seen it online, and now having the opportunity to think about your process and a lot of the wonderful things that you had to say about that journey, and also inspirational on how to get people to think about their mission as well. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all very much.
Well,
Have
then,
a good
thank
one.
you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much again. Take care.